Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Frank here. I'm actually in my garage where I keep my motor grader and my bulldozer, and that's got my Cub with the bush hog on it, and this is my tandem 6x4 four-wheel drive hydraulic dump bed gator, basically a gator, and that's use it for all kinds of gardening stuff. At the end of the last video, I was using the motor grader to fix the driveway, the lane. Got back here in the garage and parked the thing, and I was putting the stuff away and noticed that I had a broken belt. And the drive system uses a pair of belts, and one of them's broken, so I said, well, I need to go ahead and replace the belt. And then I started taking things apart and realized, where's the camera? So in my haste to get it fixed, and I'm sometimes pretty impatient, can be pretty impatient at times, I realized my camera wasn't here. So I got my camera now. I'm going to show you where I am, putting stuff back together, explain the drivetrain, the clutch assembly or tensioner, belt tensioner assembly, and maybe give you insight into how this thing works. So we'll get back in the bowels of this machine here, and I'll show you what's going on. And I'm in the process of replacing the belt and realigning the pulleys here. Get some light on. So this is of course, the front of the engine. And this is the drive pulley. I took the drive pulley off. It uses two belts, and pushed the starter pulley back further. It was creeping forward and was interfering with my clutch or my belt tensioner. So I found the set screws on it pretty loose. So tighten them up, push this pulley back about 1/4 of an inch. It gives clearance for the tensioner to come up past the outside of this pulley here. And this is the drive pulley. It's a double belt pulley held on with a bushing. So I'm getting ready to put it back together. Before I do that, I want to put the tensioner idler back on, and I just took it apart to grease it. Let me get you down there. All right, so the tensioner idler is right here. The way the drive system works on this is there's two belts, and the way I set it up, and maybe not the best way or the only way, certainly not the only way, maybe not the best way, but it's the way I decided to do it, is to use this lever and spring to operate a pivot arm with an idler pulley on it. And when I let it down this position, it tensions the belts. When I pull it all the way up, I can't right now because I got a bolt sticking out of it, the back of it. It detensions the belts and lets the engine start. And the reason you need to do that is because I've got two hydrostats being driven here simultaneously for the two axles. And when they're warm, the engine can turn them both over. But when they're cold, there's no way the engine can turn both with the starter motor to start it. The Cub Cadets normally, you could start them with, since they only have one hydrostat, you can start them even in pretty cold weather, without too much problem. In the coldest weather, some people, will either keep the hydrostat warm, or they did make a version with a clutch. Cub Cadet did. Pretty unusual, but they did make them. And it was just the same clutch assembly that was in the gear drives. And I thought about doing that here, but I really didn't have a place to put it. So I wound up using basically belt tensioning as my clutching method. Detension and tensioning the clutch, the belts. So I'm putting this idler pulley has needle bearings. I just re-greased them, and I'm trying to get it back installed here. I can do that. There we go. All right, so that's the idler. Let's get the drive pulley back on. So the way these bushings work is there's two set screw holes where there are threads in the sheave, and one hole where the thread is only on the bushing. So normally you have two set screws. They go into the two holes that are threaded on the sheave, and when you drive them in, it pulls the pulley out onto the sheave, tightens it, and when you want to remove it, you take these two set screws out, put one of them in here, thread it in all the way, and it then pops the bushing out. So it's got its own removal tool. And the reason there are pulleys like this is because there are different shaft diameters that pulley manufacturers make pulleys for. And they either make every kind of pulley with every kind of shaft diameter, or they make every kind of pulley with a bushing bore, and then they make the separate bushings with for the different diameters. So the bushings fit multiple pulleys, pulleys fit a particular type of bushing. So the combination of the pulley, the sheave, with the particular bushing size bore, and then that particular bushing with the bore that fits your shaft, gives you the combination you need. So it reduces necessary inventory dramatically. So when you get into industrial sheaves, this is how they're done. And the reason it's on this is because it's a double sheave, 2-groove pulley. It is for an A size belt, which is 1/2 inch. What happened is I was finishing up on the driveway. One of the belts broke. So now that doesn't disable the machine. It has 2 belts, so came home okay. Figured I would cover the repair a little bit in case you guys are interested. Need to keep the pulley from turning as I tighten these set screws. Alright, they're good and tight. Alright, so one of the belts broke, and I had 2 spare belts here tie wrapped inside the frame because they have to go around the drive shaft. So to install belts, you would have to take the drive shaft apart. Now that's just taking out 2 bolts and a pin, sliding the shaft apart. Not that big a deal, but I went ahead and mounted 2 spare belts. So if I need to change a belt, it's easy enough to do. So here we'll put this one on. Alright, so this is one of the 2 belts that was on it. This is one of my spares. And what I'll have to do is plan for another replacement. Let's see. Alright, so both of those belts have about the same amount of tension on them. So that's why I'm just replacing one, not both. That way this older one will fail probably before this one, and I'll have one more spare here to put on. At that point I'll have to buy a couple more spares, and I just fasten them to the frame around the drive shaft so that replacement's fairly easy. So that's the clutch mechanism. The belts are loose with the clutch handle up, or the tensioner handle up, and then when you drop it down it tensions the belt, and the belt's going this way, so this belt coming down actually pushes the idler pulley down, so its motion is actually to increase the tension. So it's pretty simple, but it seems to be working. So alright, so we've got the 2 belts on, got the idler on. This is my remaining spare belt. Let's go ahead and just put a couple tie wraps around the frame member here to hold this belt in place, so it'll be available next time. Won't get tangled in the drive shaft or anything. There we go. Alright, so that just secures the belt, and you can see it goes around the drive shaft down there. Alright, so I can demonstrate the tensioning function here. So right now it's detension, the belts are loose, the engine should spin. Oh great, I left the key on and the battery's dead. Alright, so let's so you can see that the engine turns over easily when the belts are loose like that. All right, so that's how the tensioning clutch works. All right, let's put the covers back on, and we're ready to go. So this is really the hood. The front supports the front of the hood. Got one bolt here. Two bolts here, one of which is the ground for the starter. Screw started. All right, that's just a cover. So you can see the battery here under the seat. See the first hydrostat right here, and it drives this first axle, and there's a second hydrostat underneath the engine which drives the rear axle, and the drive shaft runs all the way through. The pulley belts, the belts are between the two hydrostats, so it drives the rear of this hydrostat and the front of the other hydrostat. All right, so that's it. All right, guys, that finishes up this little minor maintenance item on the motor grader, ready to put back in service again. So that's as simple as it is. And like I said, tensioning the belt, detensioning the belt. I mean, that technique's used a lot on lawnmowers and stuff, inexpensive lawnmowers. So I mean, it's not a unique way of doing it by any means. I did look at electric clutches and stuff like that. Electric PTO. I mean, I could have put an electric PTO on there, but most of them only had a single belt, and I wanted the redundancy of two belts. So this was the method I came up with. It's the same. I use the same method on the bulldozer as well. So anyway, as far as transferring 12 horsepower, the twin belts is fine. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.